So thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you all for being here. This is Modern Management, Adapt How You Lead for Agile Success. I wrote these 3 books, which are here, because I found out that a lot of people think we don't need management when we have Agile approaches, right? There's no manager position in Scrum. This is good. There's no management position in Lean, regardless of whether or not you use the Kanban method or a straight Kanban, right? This is also good. So, but I find that we do need managers. But what we don't need is a lot of control. We need leadership. So earlier today, I was in a conversation with somebody, and they said, I need to write a blog post about this, which I will later on, maybe today or tomorrow. How do you align an organization, right? There's IT and then the rest of the business. And I said, you have an overarching goal, and everyone produces for that overarching goal. That's how you align everybody. And that's all about leadership, not about what people did and what people didn't do and where their progress is and what the status is. All of those outputs are in service of this leadership, and we can do those outputs differently in any case. So let me talk a little bit about why management exists to begin with. When managers manage themselves first, they really think about how their actions affect the culture. That's that leftmost purple circle up in the left-hand corner. When managers create a harmonic whole by leading and serving others, they actually work towards making people feel a certain way. When they create that harmonic whole of a team, people feel really good. They understand why they're working. They understand how they can work together. And then the third piece of why management exists is about actions for innovation. Peter Drucker, and I'm going to say this later, said that every organization exists for just one reason: innovation. So these are all the principles for modern management, and I'm not going to read them to you. I will talk about them as we proceed. So let me talk first about how great managers manage themselves first. I really like to think about congruence when I think about how managers manage themselves. So notice that there's self, other, and context. This is the Satir congruence model. And this is the very, very high level brief explanation of congruence. A lot of organizational procedures and process and demands blame other people. So when you blame, you disregard the other person. You always think about yourself, you think about the context, but how do you manage other people and how you work with other people? Well, if you have a culture of blaming, you blame people for not meeting their dates. And especially if you talk about an individual, that's just wrong, right? That's all resource efficiency thinking, which I will discuss in a few minutes. When we placate other people, we disregard ourselves. So if you're a manager, if you have a senior manager who is not in a senior management team that does not manage the project portfolio, every project is number one, right? You have 5 number one projects on your plate. I don't even know how to deal with one number one project on my plate sometimes. That's because I have incoming urgent things to do. So even though I know I have only one number one project, I have other things that require my immediate discussion or my immediate response. When I placate other people, that's when I say, oh, I'll try. Yeah. So I see in the chat, 5 cannot be number one. No, I agree with you, Lizette. 5 is not number one, right? And there is no way to manage that. But every time you hear, I'll try, especially with that little sigh at the end, you can be pretty sure that's placating behavior. Now, then there's super reasonable. I used to think I was a Spock-like person. I realize I'm not actually a Spock-like person, where you only consider the context. You forget about yourself, you forget about the other person, and all you think of is the context. Well, we should be able to do this. It doesn't matter that we're all working in dispersed locations or that we all need various tools to do our work, but we should be able to. Or studies say, I really love it when people say, you shouldn't feel that way. A long time ago, my husband said, I don't like asparagus. I like many, many, many kinds of vegetables. I do not like asparagus. And my husband said to me, you should like it. So I said, I only like it with a ton of butter and salt, because who doesn't like butter and salt? And he said, huh? I said, you can't tell me how I should or should not feel, even if it's something as simple as asparagus. When we are irrelevant, we consider none of the above. So if you've ever been in a tense situation, in a tense discussion in the organization, and I'm from Boston, so we have the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Patriots. If you follow any sports at all, you might not. But and then somebody says, how about those Red Sox? Everyone kind of looks around and says, that that had no bearing on our conversation. When we are congruent, we balance ourselves, the other, and the context. And a lot of what happens with first line managers and well, maybe I should just say people early in their real management career, that they don't understand how their actions affect other people, and they too often come off as either blaming or placating. So let me talk a little bit about the manage yourself myths. I'm not going to walk through all these myths. I'm going to take one myth and talk about it. If you see other myths on this page that you would like to discuss later, write it down, and either we can talk about it when I'm done, or you can send me an email. That's totally fine. So let's talk about the managers believe in indispensable employees. So back many, many years ago, I worked as a software developer, and my manager loved one of my colleagues named Steve. Steve was a really great guy. He thought he was a 10x developer. I wasn't so sure he was 10x. He certainly understood pieces of the operating system and pieces of the application. We did not all understand ourselves, right? There were 6 of us plus Steve, so we didn't always understand it. But he did, which was really helpful, because if we needed help, we could go ask him. Now, the problem with asking Steve is that he used to just say, I'll do it. So until I came along, I was one of I think the newest people in the software department then. I said, no, I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to show me what you're doing. He said, you wouldn't be interested in that. I said, oh, yes, I would. Right. So I said, no, you cannot be like this. I understand that you have all these talents and skills, but I cannot learn if I don't see. So he said, fine, Johanna, we will do this. So we worked together and we did that thing. Then fast forward 3 weeks to a Friday afternoon, we all realized we need another editor. This is back in the days of Tico, character-based editor, before Windows systems. I am old. I have the gray hair to prove it. So Steve said, I will just take care of this on the weekend. And we all said, why would you give up your weekend for this? And he said, I really like this. Okay, fine. So we all went to the bar because it was Friday afternoon and we were young, and we went and had a couple beers. I took off and I must have done a bunch of bicycling that weekend. That was back in my bicycling days. Other people did other things. We all came back to work refreshed on Monday morning. We see Steve there at 9 a.m. It's clear he has not shaved. I'm pretty sure from the stink of him, he has not taken a shower. And he says to us, here's what I did for you. I worked all weekend, pulled 2 all-nighters. And here's the editor I have for you. I'm going home now to take a shower and sleep. This is really good because he was kind of stinky. So he went home and we tried to use the editor. We could not use it at all. In the meantime, because Steve was holding on to all of his stuff so closely, we had a whole bunch of work that was queuing up behind all the work that Steve would need to do. And we did not know when he would be back in the office. So we all divided up the work and we all tried to do some of his work during the day. We failed miserably. Luckily, we figured out that by 10 or 10:30, we should ask for help. We figured out how to work with each other. We were not literally pairing the way we think about pairing now, but we worked in twos and we were able to get a whole bunch of Steve's stuff done. When he came back into the office, he was shocked and very disappointed, and my manager was really shocked. The manager said, "How could you take Steve's work away from him? He's so much faster than you are." And of course, I'm sure I said this. I'm sure that the other people were much nicer. I said, "How can you possibly make us wait for him when we can do it ourselves? What is it about him that's so valuable?" So this indispensable employee, this 10x person, it all comes from a place um, where we think that people have no capabilities other than the narrow capabilities that they come with when they walk in the door. And my experience is that if we use a growth mindset and we work really hard together, we are much more able to do many more things. So there's lots of things there. And if we want to talk about micromanagement later, we might do that. So when I think about principles for managing yourself, I think about where do I add value? That's my purpose in the organization. And how can I build a safe environment? I'm not going to talk about all 7 of the principles. And I find that when I admit that I don't know, when I admit that I need help, I find that I build more safety into the environment. I make it possible as a manager, when I admit I don't know, when I admit I need help, that's when I make it possible for everybody else to succeed. Because I make it possible for them to say, yeah, not going to happen. I don't get it. So the I really like that, Godwin. Growth mindset is the bomb. Yeah, I really like that. So we can think about all these principles, but I was just going to address those two. So let me talk about great managers leading and serving others. That managing is about leading and serving is not about directing and controlling. So I'm going to ask you to put stuff in the chat. Think back to the best manager you had. How did you feel when you worked there? And what do you remember? Do you remember the work or the teams or the managers? Just what do you remember? I see amazing. What the best manager you had? How did you feel? Very supportive. Yep. And what do you remember? My boss cared about me, gave me a free vacation. Oh, nice. Increased my confidence. Inspiring, open-minded. My always had the best interest in me. Keep that demonic boss for the next questions. Very supportive, career path, empowered. Let us have fun. Now, take just one of your terrible managers, and this does not matter if wherever you are in the hierarchy. How did you feel when you worked there? Oh yeah, Lizette says I only had one great manager. Bullied, horrible. Um, I think that demonic comes into play here. Tension, yeah. I feel that too. And what do you, yeah, toxic. What do you remember of the work or the people or anything about this? A blaming attitude, always angry, low confidence. What do you remember about the job that you did? Think back to that horrible manager. What do you remember? Pain? Yeah, I believe that. I love my job just like my boss. Lots of rework, stress. Do you remember any of the team members? I wanted to quit, sleepless nights, no clarity, no direction. Yeah, my experience when I think back about to my best managers, I remember the people, I remember the work, I remember the products, I remember all kinds of stuff. And I really remember how I felt when I worked there. And with all the terrible managers, yeah, several of them have said, several people have said, mostly terrible managers. I don't even remember the products. I sort of have a vague memory. I have a vague memory of who I worked with, and all I remember is all that turnover, all that stress, all that tension, all those sleepless nights, all that feeling like I was never going to be good enough for this job. Yeah. So people remember how you made them feel. So let me talk about outdated management assumptions and how they color our management actions. You might not have read about McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. So let me give you the quick introduction. Theory X is people avoid work. People need to be controlled. People don't want responsibility. It's all about the money, not about what money can do for you. And people have no creativity except for getting around the rules. Theory Y is that people want to master their work. They can manage themselves. They seek responsibility. They want to learn and accomplish something that is greater than they are, and that people are creative. So theory Y is all about the growth mindset, which Godwin told us was the bomb earlier, right? So people, I have seen in organizations that people often do jobs much, much better than we expected of them. They master challenge, and people always take responsibility for the work and their relationships. So think about everybody on this call now. Oh my God, Andrea's just saying, "I don't pay you to think," was a bad boss's favorite saying. You do, you do get paid to think. Astonishing, just astonishing. So I might have to take that at some point, Andrea, and blog about it. So we take responsibility for our work at home and our relationships. We all have some kind of housing experience, which means we either enter into rental agreements or mortgages. Many of us have families. I have a spouse and grown children. Thank God they're all grown in these days of coronavirus, and they're not living with me because I think I would have made them crazy by now. But we all take responsibilities. And if we think about the day-to-day work, we all get ourselves to work pretty much on time, pretty much rest, pretty much fed, and we all come to work wanting to do a good job. So we might need support or training, but people can always do this work in theory Y. And Andrea said, until you crush their spirits and they stop caring and just show up for the salary. Exactly, Andrea. Exactly. People live up or down to your expectations of them, which I find a fascinating thing. So there's all kinds of leading and serving other myths. I'm going to talk about just the marginally useful people and keeping them on a team. Back before we had daily builds and we had automated builds, then we had a person who had to do the build. We had, I believe, PVCS was our version control system. And we had someone in charge of the version control system, and that person left very fast. I believe that he had a family emergency, he had to go back home. We were not set up. This is way back in the 80s, right? We were not set up for distributed work back then. So I found I was here as a director level person, a director level manager, and our version control leader had gone. So I hired somebody as a contract version control person, and I said, "Here's how we work here. Here's how we do things." I was using continuous integration at the time, which meant we really needed somebody to help us with our builds every single night, right? So fine. Um, I hired Susan, who is not her name, and Susan said, "I can do this, no problem." I introduced her to all the people. They took care of, here's where this stuff is, here's where that stuff is. We, of course, realized we didn't know where everything was. So her first couple of days were a little stressful. And then she started to create the builds every single day. That worked really well, except Susan had very few interpersonal skills. So she would insult people. She would tell them that their code was wrong. She would tell them all kinds of things. She was an ungeller of the first degree, right? An ungeller is when you walk into a room and everybody stops talking. That's an ungeller. So Susan was an ungeller. And I gave her feedback. I offered her coaching. Well, I worked with her really, really hard for 2 or 3 weeks. And at the end of that third week, everyone in my team, everyone in my groups came and stood in the opening of my office and said, "JR, it's either her or us. We're all going to leave on Monday if she does not leave now." I thought, I have really screwed up. Now, that was my initial thought, right? I had really screwed up. Not that they were wrong, because I'm sure that they were right. If I only saw some of this, she must have been quite bad with the other people. So I said, "Can I keep her around till I find a new person?" "No," they said. "You need to get rid of her now." So I brought her into my office. I said, I'm stopping the contract. I will buy you out of the contract. People cannot work with you. I cannot keep you here. "What if I try harder?" she said. "It doesn't matter. I've been coaching you and offering feedback from the stuff that I see all along. It's not working. So no more." So I fired her that day. I had to buy her out of the contract. Luckily, there were only 3 weeks left on the contract. I had been interviewing people. We were able to hire somebody the next week who could then start the week after. So we were in trouble for about a week and a half. However, the people on the team said, "We will step up," because it was more important to them to not have to deal with Susan than it was for the ease of her delivering the bills, right? That's a really huge thing. So if you have marginally useful people on the team, the best thing is to get rid of them. And if they are employees or even if they're contractors, see if you can. I always like to say, see if your competitors want them, right? Not because you want to give a bad person to your competitor, because I did this with somebody else who just was not interacting well with the people in our current company, but there was a competitor across town. I said to her, "They have a very different culture. You might fit there really well." She said, "Fine." So I called up Tim, the other guy, and I said, "I know you guys have a really different culture. Um, I have a person here who's not really fitting this culture. You want to talk to her?" So I found her a job at my competitor. I was very happy. She was very happy. Tim was very happy. Everybody was very happy. And I did not have a marginally useful person on the team. So if you cannot cut them out, right, make it so that they don't have any work to do, or you cannot help them find a job at your competitor or help them find a job, period. Make sure they do not interact with anybody on your team. You will be much better served. Yes, sometimes we think a warm body is better than nobody. Nobody is much, much better than a warm body. So when I find that when managers don't lead and serve, we have this incongruence. It's like they don't respect other people. In the chat, there was something about people not managers not trusting people. Yeah, that's exactly it. They don't have enough empathy, and the work feels totally like drudgery. So, if we think about the principles for leading and serving others, I'm going to talk about um, seek outcomes by optimizing for an overarching goal. What is the goal for your entire team? How can you optimize for that goal as a team? Now, if you are managing a function where, and I still see this in supposedly agile organizations, say you're a test manager and you are the people manager for the people on your team, which is really a work group. If you're lucky, the people in the team all work on cross-functional agile teams. If not, you have even more of a problem. But what is the overarching goal? As a test team is to offer information about the product under test. So what do you have to do for your to support your people when they report on the project under test? You might say, how can you work as a cross-functional team with developers? How can we learn from each other as what with experiments and learning? What do I need to do as the leader of the work group to help your teams succeed? So there's all kinds of I did the encourage experiments and learning with with the optimizing for an overarching goal. So yeah, flow efficiency is when we work as a team. Resource efficiency is when we work one by one. So the third piece is that great managers lead for innovation. And when I read this quote by Peter Drucker, every organization needs one core competence, innovation. I thought, oh, you know, that man was really, really smart. If you go back to read any Drucker, just substitute woman or people for the word man. He only thought that managers could be men. At least he did that in his writing. I'm pretty sure if he had met me, he would have changed his mind. So I add to that, especially management innovation. The more your organization has this one core competence of management innovation, the more likely they are to succeed as an organization. So think about where managers spend their time. I see a whole lot of it in the tactical actions where we talk about execution, right? Senior leadership teams talk about execution. They're focused on the immediate, the low level. They will ask, how are people doing the work? They then, and especially for an agile transformation, they copy what other people do. How many of you have heard we will install safe or we will copy the Spotify model, which Spotify doesn't use anymore, right? All this stuff. And they're focused on short-term actions. Now, we need to understand our short-term actions in the service of high-level plans, the longer time frame, the larger scale. We need to answer the why for the organization, the why for this product, the why for everything. We have to say that, especially with agile approaches, what is unique to our context? How can we make it work with our long-term thinking? So there's plenty of organizational leadership myths. Let me talk about standardizing on how people work, especially their agile approach. So I had delivered 6 or 7 of my agile and lean project workshops to a regulated company in the Boston area. Think of them as a bank. They were not actually a bank, but think of them that way. They had outsourced a whole bunch of their software development and all of their testing years and years and years ago. And they were finding that everything took much, much longer than it should have. So I did a little cycle time analysis with them. I said, if you move to an agile approach, you will get better coherence in the teams. So, and they will be able to do the work better. Fine. So I did a whole bunch of distributed and in the office training. And what I discovered was not only were all the teams different, all the work products were different. Some teams could use Scrum. Some teams could use iterations but not Scrum. Some teams could use Flow. Some teams could use Flow with a cadence of deliverables. So fast forward to 3 years later, I've been teaching a couple of workshops a year. They all really loved it. It was wonderful. They have a new CIO. New CIO says, I want to install Scrum at all levels in this organization. I did it before. We will do it again. And Johanna, since you have a lot of experience with this and people have really enjoyed your workshops, I want a proposal from you and I want it next week. Okay, fine. That was 2 or 3 days away. I gave him and by the way, I want all of the leadership team to understand Scrum and be Agile also. I said, fine. That's a different problem. He said, I don't have any more time to talk with you. We will have this conversation later when I have your proposal. So I gave him a proposal and I sent it to him in email. About half an hour later, I get a phone call and I hear paper rattling, right? You know what paper sounds like when it's crumbled up and rattling, right? So he was on his speakerphone and he said, I cannot believe you. You insulted me with this proposal. You're asking for way too much money. Godwin, it was probably not enough. Way too much money, way too much time. And the leaders don't need a 2-day workshop with ongoing coaching. They need an hour. It's just Scrum. How hard can it be?
Wow.
All of you know, I know. All of you know how hard just Scrum can be. So this was a person who had no understanding of what he wanted, and because we were not able to talk in advance enough, he thought it was a great idea to standardize on how people work. So the last I knew, they were now on their second or third CIO from him. So I should probably go back and ask them if they need any support or assistance. But he thought that standardizing was perfect, that everybody had the same context. No, everybody does not have the same context. So I really like to say, let's embrace the organization's messiness. When we define the organization's why, then we can iterate on the strategy and plan for change. So the innovation principles are, well, let me talk about building empathy with the people who do the work. One of the things I see a lot in organizations is that we have a lot of bureaucracy, that people think that we need to do the same thing for the same people all the time. We don't need, people need different things. So why should we make people wait for something that they don't need to wait for? Why? So for example, say that you have a rule about only giving promotions once a year at employee review time. Let's not talk about the fact that that's just boneheaded in many, many ways. But you have somebody who started 3 months ago and you realize, oh my goodness, this person is doing such a great job. Their team is so much more valuable now that they're on it. I want to give this person a raise and a promotion. But HR does not let you do that because they have a cookie cutter approach. Thank you, Alice. A cookie cutter approach to how they do any promotion and raises. That's a bureaucratic thing that does not serve the organization at all. Now, let me talk a little bit about catching people succeeding. How many times do you hear in a given day, thank you, or I really like that, or wow, I really understood that now? That's a form of appreciation, and appreciations are much more valuable than change focused feedback. Because when you appreciate me for something I did that you liked, I will do more of it. And if you tell me I'm doing something wrong, I might or might not do less of it. So let me talk about what the organization rewards. If you look on the bottom picture, that's resource efficiency. When we reward people by their individual contribution, we assume that work comes in, the first person takes it, they hand it off to the next person, often with a delay. The second person takes it, they hand it off, often with a delay, to the third person, and so on and so on and so on. You think you can tell who does what there, but you don't see all the people who kind of um, clean up after the people before them. Now contrast that with flow efficiency, which is what we want in Agile teams. When the team works together, that's as a harmonic whole, as in Drucker's words, that's all about flow efficiency. If your team works in flow efficiency, how do you know what different people do? How can you tell what to reward in the organization? Well, the problem is you can't. So if you have not yet read Accounting for Slavery, you probably want to. That's where we see the origins of cost accounting in slavery. It's astonishing and horrifying. So we have all of these myths of management, that we can divide and conquer the work, that building up inventory is good, that cost accounting works for software. It does not. That's because knowledge work is, first of all, it's not like factory work, where I'm not sure that cost accounting really works either, but it's definitely not like slavery. So we need to really rethink how we manage in organizations. So I really like Edgar Schein's um, ideas about culture. And he talks about artifacts, values, and assumptions. I'm going to talk about how people treat each other, what people can discuss, how the manager and the organization rewards people. When we talk about the culture in these terms, you can much more easily see what the culture is. So let me talk about Lewin's equation. That says the behavior is a function of the person in the environment. So if you say to people, we want collaboration, you talk about collaboration, right? As in flow efficiency, and then you reward individual work. What will a person do? Why would they collaborate with anybody else? So we often blame people in the organization for working the way the environment asks them to work. So really think about this the next time you are supposed to give someone a performance review, or think about how to offer feedback on their behavior. It's all about the environment. But if you think about how people treat each other, what people can discuss, and what we reward, you are much more likely to succeed. So I really like this Grunin and Whitaker culture quote. The culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. And you have seen that every single place you have worked. Every single place. So I am not expecting that anybody is going to be perfect. I only want people to make progress. How can you think about your actions which affect the entire culture? How do people feel when you work? And how do you create and move towards purpose? I am looking for behaviors of Agile managers, not beliefs. You don't have to believe a thing I'm saying. I'm asking you to change your behaviors and to start with yourself, because people always remember how you made them feel. And if you don't have an overarching goal that talks about the why, nothing else matters. So the 7 principles: clarify the purpose, build empathy with the people who do the work, build a safe environment, seek outcomes by optimizing for an overarching goal, encourage experiments and learning, catch people succeeding, and exercise your value-based integrity. So I hope that we stay in touch. Um, please sign up for my email newsletter, The Pragmatic Manager, on my website. Please link with me on LinkedIn, and the Modern Management Made Easy books. You can start there. I'm going to stop the share, and I will take questions.
Wow.
Questions, please.
Thank you very much. Guys, the floor is open for questions. This is wow. And Alberto said, wow, mind blowing. It's amazing. So, guys, questions, because you might not have this opportunity tomorrow. She's here and here now. So ask every question, even if it's on relationship, she will answer them.
So let me talk about micromanagement for just a little bit.
Yes.
So somebody asked about micromanagement there. What I find is that the senior leadership is in a team, and hopefully we have feature teams or product teams working together. So
Yeah.
the feature teams and the product teams understand what they have to do, more or less. The senior leadership team understands what they have to do, more or less. But the people in the middle are not part of teams. So that's why you get all these managers asking, when will it be done? Because they
Yeah.
don't know how to look for the status on the boards. And they don't know how to ask the right questions. They just don't know. So everybody's got their fingers in the work going down all the way. And that's the problem that's the micromanagement that we see. And the way to do that is to get people optimizing up for an overarching goal and to work in cohorts. So first line managers need to be a cohort of first line managers, middle managers, cohort of middle managers. The more cohorts you have, the more easier it is to stop the micromanagement, because that way people understand what their deliverables are at every level.
Yeah, somebody said ask powerful questions. So my question to you, ma'am, does ego has anything to play with this?
So does ego enter? Is that the question?
Yes.
Of course. So, and it often goes back to how we reward managers. So a lot of times we do not reward managers for their facilitation or coaching or feedback or facilitation on the work or removing impediments for a team. Instead, we actually say to managers, you're responsible for this product. A manager is not a product manager, maybe, but not really, right? But a manager is not responsible for shipping a product. And the more we reward managers for shipping, for all that nonsense, the more we get ego-based, ego-driven management, which is much more controlling, not leadership.
Okay. And there's a question there that says, how do you suggest dealing with a toxic manager that micromanages and kills the morale of the team?
You asked about the toxic manager that micromanages. Um, let's talk about at least 3 options. So, and if you are not worried about your job, you might try this option. I have actually done this in the past where I said, I it feels to me like you're micromanaging me. Would you like to work with me and see what I'm doing? And often that means calling the manager's bluff. And the manager says, no, I just need to know that you're doing this now and this tomorrow and this here. And I say, I am not willing to work that way. I am willing to show you my deliverables and demo them. So one of the real ways to get rid of micromanagement is to make sure you have real deliverables, right? Not outputs, but outcomes. So that's one way to do it. The other is to make sure that you maybe extend a little empathy to the manager. Does the manager actually know how to see the status of the work that you and your team are doing? Because maybe the manager does not know. And um, and as for the third one, often it's about asking them context-free questions so you can understand what they really want. I find that most managers micromanage out of fear. So if you can understand why they are fearful, why are they afraid for their jobs, you are much more likely to have a better conversation. So maybe start with empathy as opposed to obnoxiousness, as I did.
Okay. Then another question says, are team-based rewards realistic? What are some companies that rewards the team instead of individual performance? And which companies are more successful financially?
So when people do team-based rewards, it's not always just team-based rewards. The rewards are a mixture of individual rewards plus team-based rewards. So Menlo Innovations, for example, does this. Particular software does this. A lot of times they do it because they realize that bonuses don't make sense with an agile approach. And how can they give everybody a stake in doing the right work at the right time? So I find that team-based rewards are realistic, and it also means that you need much more open book management and you need many fewer management bonuses. Right now, I don't use OKRs because most of my clients are using OKRs just as they were MBOs. But if you have an overarching goal, you are much more likely to get to where you want to be. And if everybody works towards those goals, that's how you get to team-based rewards. So I don't recommend going there in one fell swoop. First, I recommend talking about it, discussing how will we protect people's incomes? Because right now, a lot of managers have a way too small regular salary and way too large bonus. If we start saying we're going to take away the bonuses, people are not going to stay there. So let's talk about what a reasonable salary and bonus looks like and how to make that much more agile, right? Not make it not deliver iterative bonuses, but work with an agile culture.
Yeah.
OKRs are objectives and key results, and I've written a whole lot about them, and there are other people who have written books about them. So take a look on my site and see what else you see for OKRs. All right, so let me answer Alice's question. So Alice, you're asking about how to help managers change their mindset so teams can self-manage themselves instead of having an imposing dictator manager. Um, how can you change micromanagement to servant leadership? And it's all in the rewards system for the manager. Remember I showed you Lewin's equation? It's all about the reward system for managers. If their manager is asking them, how did your team do on this output? Did they finish this thing? Did they do that thing? If their manager is asking them, you have no hope. However, if managers are willing to do things like read these books, join my cohorts later, and in general think about what their job really is, what is the value that they offer to the organization, they will start changing their behavior. So I am not focused on changing people's mindset at all. I'm all about behaviors, right? Because an agile approach is a culture change. You cannot do a culture, you cannot change the culture. Well, you cannot really do an agile approach without changing the culture.
Absolutely. Guys, keep the questions coming.